Well, welcome everybody. We have people here from Oregon. Shout out Sandra Bullock. How's it going? Good to see you. We got swimmers from New York. We also have a synchro athlete, which is awesome. Someone from LA, Texas, and Seattle. So everybody is here from all around the U.S., which is great. So thank you for spending some time with us on this wonderful Friday. For me, it's afternoon. I'm on the East Coast, but for Rebecca and Caroline, they're on the West Coast. So basically how this webinar came about is I grew up swimming with Caroline and her brother Clark. We're all from Louisville, Kentucky, and we swam on Lakeside Swim Team growing up. And our team, just like many of the other teams in the US right now, are in quarantine and we don't have access to a pool. And so a bunch of my swimmers are, kind of struggling with dealing with that and trying to figure out ways to better themselves during this time. And I coach and I love swimming stroke technique. And I know the mental aspect is a big component to this sport, but I'm not necessarily an expert on that. So I decided to kind of cast my net out to people that I'm aware of that are very, very good in this field to try to bring together a webinar for not only my kiddos, but for all of you guys on some information that I think would be very important and well received at this time. So that's kind of how this all came together. So I'm really, really thankful for Rebecca and Caroline spending some time with us and me today so I can learn kind of more of what they're doing and also what they have to say for this time in quarantine.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. We're excited to be here. We're excited to spend this time with you as well. I know we've stepped a lot into the mindset, and it's fun to reconnect with swimming through you as well and through what you do. So my name is Rebecca Soni. I'm one of the co-founders of Rise along with Caroline, and we are excited to host this webinar with you today. I am a two-time Olympic swimmer in Beijing 2008 and London 2012, six-time medalist, breaststroker. 5 years ago, Caroline and I began this journey of creating Rise Athletes as a way of taking what we learned from our swimming careers, confidence being one of them, our theme for today, and figuring out how to teach that to young athletes as well as to ourselves in our next phases of our life, because we can't swim forever, at least not at that level. So it's about taking what we learned, becoming the best in the world, bringing in other Olympians as well. We have a team of about 15 Olympians that come work and teach with us, and helping to give that back to the next generation of athletes, both young athletes as well as elite athletes. So there's so much more to being a great athlete. While of course it's really important to dial down our technique, to train well, but our focus here at Rise is all about mindset. Like Abby said, mindset dictates how we do everything, how we race, how we train, how we act, how we feel happy. And just like we do drills in practice, we can also do drills of mindset. Mindset is trainable, mindset is buildable. And with this in mind, Rise Athletes was created. It is an online mentorship platform where young athletes can train their mindset and with the help of their Olympian mentor. So we've got athletes working one-on-one, everywhere from ages 12 and up, all levels, beginner to elites, working on finding and strengthening that person behind the athlete. So we're excited to be here today. We've got people from all over, and we're really welcoming to you all and hope that this is a fun conversation with all of us today. Of course, drop stuff in the chat. We always love to hear what you're thinking about what we're sharing with you. And while we're getting introed here, make sure you also have a pen and paper nearby, have your journal or something else to take notes on. And we'll go ahead and dive into some fun stuff pretty soon here. So with that, I want to introduce Caroline as well, my co-founder. We have known each other forever. We actually met through my sister, my older sister, who was a swimmer and met Caroline and loved her. And I didn't meet Caroline until a few years later, but eventually we shared an Olympic dorm room well, sweet together in Beijing. We spent a lot of time swimming around the oceans in Southern California back when I lived there a couple years ago. And of course, building a business and program together. So with that, I'll pass it over to Caroline.
Awesome. Thanks, Reb. As she said, I actually was friends with Rebecca's older sister before I even knew Reb. We would go to swim camps at a young age and just swim for hours and hours and hours on end. You know how the swim camps can go. And I met Reb through international competitions, and throughout college, you always know about somebody and then you meet them and then you connect the dots and connect the pieces. And I was like, wait, you're Rita's sister. Oh my gosh. So Reb and I have known each other for a really long time. And so I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I grew up swimming with Abby, and my brother Clark also, who's an Olympian in 2012. So he knows both Abby and Rebecca. But I swam in 2008 at Beijing, won a bronze medal there, and had also a handful of international competitions that I competed in throughout my career. Was middle distance and distance freestyle. I say that with quotes because that was loose. And went to the University of Florida, also backtrack there, also for college. So I'm grateful to be here today and really excited to share the information that we have, and not only share information, but connect with you all, because it's so important to have that connection here today as we are all in quarantine throughout the world. So thank you again.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and pop our slides up here. Today, we're talking about confidence, especially confidence during quarantine. So what do we mean when we are talking about gaining confidence? Obviously, as this is an interesting time, we're all away from our sports, at least we're not doing things the way that we normally were. And it can be a time when we start to lose our foundation a little bit and feel like, I don't really know what to do or how to do it, or how do I make sure I'm doing a lot of doubts, right? A lot of these doubts coming in. So what do we mean when we're talking about gaining confidence? Well, confidence is universal. It is a part of everything that you do. It's not just dedicated to one thing in your life, for example, swimming, or another instrument that you play. Like, I'm confident when I do this, but not when I do that. Well, of course, there are some shifts in being more confident. I did notice I am more confident walking on a pool deck than I am walking into like a business meeting, right? But it is universal at the same time. And one thing does lead into the other. Confidence here builds confidence there, which is great for us at this time. When we can't swim, it means we can still be building our confidence. So as we talk about how we're going to be working on this in a couple of different ways, it's important to also note, this webinar was created for this time. We're in this strange new world, this quarantine time, completely unprecedented. We're navigating new waters, so to speak. We're figuring a lot of things out. There's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotions, a lot of big stuff happening out in the world, and also things that feel really small happening in our own households, but those are actually pretty big as well. So we're trying to keep our schedules. We're trying to figure out when to do things, how to manage school online, how to manage all the things we want to be doing. Some things are probably getting done. Some things might not be getting done, right? Some people can be really motivated at this time, really motivated by the freedom. Others are not. Others can fall apart with too much freedom, right? And we can bounce back and forth between those things. You might notice one day you're waking up more confident, thinking that, all right, I'm on a good track. And then the next day you're like, I can't do anything. We can all fluctuate back and forth, and all of this is good. Motivation comes and goes. And we're going to dive into a little bit of what motivation actually is today. But also just wanted to note that this is a scary time even. We don't know when we might get back in the pool or might get back to whatever sport we're doing. We don't really know really what tomorrow looks like. And every day is taken one day at a time. So know that emotions and fears are not bad. And it's okay to feel them, and it's even more okay to discuss them with the people around you, with people that you can connect with online as well. And to really allow that and not just tune that out is also a great thing. So that's my kind of disclaimer on this time. Let me see if I can figure out how to get to the next slide.
All right. So as we know, our brains handle things in chunks. And so we chose the number 3 for this because it feels like when we look at how we can make a change through a difficult time, sometimes it feels overwhelming when there's a lot. So we decided to focus on 3 things today, and 3 things that you can choose to do all 3 in, or you can choose to take one and really execute it to the best of your ability. But they're here for you so that you have the options. So we're gonna talk about tuning into our internal environment and internal motivation, accountability and connection, and then creation. So the importance of all of these actually go hand in hand very, very well. But again, this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be something that you can look at and say, yes, like I really want to do that. I really want to find an accountability buddy. I really want to understand my internal environment. And I really want to create or play or explore within the means that I can. So to frame it up again, we are finding a way for you to understand yourself and to tune into your internal motivation. That connection doesn't have to just be in person, that you can have an accountability buddy, as we say, accountability buddy from afar. Thank God for technology. And that you can still have fun and be creative and really tap into that with your imagination to improve yourself. Okay, so we put this quote up because everybody loves a good quote. But this one, your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. So again, you're in control of your own outcomes, and those outcomes will be what you design them to be, and not some grandiose expectation that you've created from everybody else wanting these for you. So your attitude, the way you see things, will determine how high you rise. And rise, no pun intended. And by Zig Ziglar, of course.
Awesome. And also what I take from this quote too is that it's not just about certain moments, but about all moments. So it's your attitude in all moments, in the ups and in the downs. And it's also not always that it always has to be positive, right? Forced positivity is not necessarily a good thing, but it's how we can deal with this at all times that makes the difference. So this is our first item, tuning into our internal motivation. As we dive into this a little bit, this is going to be our exercise for the day, and we'll get into how to actually make it an exercise in just a moment. But it's important to distinguish motivation. It's not always like a go get it, like, yeah, willpower, let's go, force. It's more of a noticing of, what do I actually want? It's more of a getting to know yourself process, internal motivation is. So we're in charge of our own decisions and schedules and what we do and what we don't do at this time to some degree. Everyone's on somewhat similar but somewhat different experience of this time. And as we dive into this as well, I want to note for the coaches and for the everybody on this call, this is something that we all do at all times. This is not just sport specific. It's not just for young athletes. This is something that we put together this exercise from our own experience now. We're not training to be athletes anymore. We just are doing life. So this is stuff that is really relevant across the board. So what is internal motivation? It's two things. It's motivation that comes from within yourself. So again, getting to know yourself. And it's also, choosing to do something for the sake of doing it, not necessarily for an outcome. Yes, we are very, very, very outcome oriented. We swim because we want to get better. We train because we want to be faster time. And, when we were competing for the Olympics, we were training for a moment 4 years away. But that was the moment. That was what drove everything, right? And when we dive into some of this internal motivation, it's also asking, like, what do I actually enjoy doing? Which, as we pull in some of our more, the creative and the fun stuff towards the end, that's more like, I want to figure out how I'm doing this just to do this. I'm not doing this to check off a box. We like our checklists, but sometimes it's good to tune into just, what do I want right now? And as we dive into this exercise, and as you work on this and do this over time, it's important to note that whenever we work on mindset, it's small changes being done time and time again. So just like when you're at the gym doing your bicep curls, I don't know, go for it. Well, you're not just gonna do one with the heaviest weight possible, right? Yeah, right. Abby's pumping it away. We're gonna start small, and we're gonna do a lot of them, and then we're gonna do it again tomorrow, and we're gonna do it tomorrow, right? So little changes over a small period of time. It's really hard to find click the next buttons. I wanted to throw this in here because a lot of times as we are discussing mindset, we have this inclination of, like, again, that forced positivity of, like, I'm always on it and I'm always super positive and I'm always striving to improve. But as this Venn diagram, which I love Venn diagrams because they really hold complexity. It's not just this or that, it's both, right? That's life. So we have to take two things into account, which really works well with our topic of internal motivation, because it's about, yes, constantly striving to improve yourself, but it's also about loving yourself just as you are. It's a meeting in the middle. That's where the magic happens. We have to constantly swing between checking in, how am I doing? I'm doing well, pat myself on the shoulder, and then continue to improve, right? If we're all the way over into the constantly striving to improve, we're going to notice we're not very much enjoying this process at all, right? And we're limiting ourselves and our growth by always just forcing. We really, when I was swimming, I always say that one of the things that made me a great swimmer was that I was able to tune into myself, to hear myself, to work with myself, and not just try to improve and move towards what I should be doing and what others were doing. All right, so here is our exercise, and I'll walk you through it as we get going, our internal motivation builder. It's, again, just a reminder of this is a small thing. And I keep saying this because I want you to acknowledge that we have this little, we'll call it a little monster in our head that says, oh, that makes sense. That's super easy. I got it. Easy. Nailed it. Done. Right? When, again, it's not about getting it done. It's about doing it over and over, small steps, small reps. That's how change happens. I fall into this, this mindset very often of, like, this beginner's mastery of, like, I mastered it. I've got it. If I remember when I started meditating, I would sit down and be like, yeah, this makes so much sense. I should be feeling so calm. I should be feeling great for the rest of my day. And, like, I nailed it. And I, like, don't have to do it again, but I do. That's the whole point. So just noticing if you want to be like, yeah, that's so easy, I don't need to even write it down. That should be a little trigger of, like, nope, I'm skipping something. Let me dive into that a little bit. All right. So with our 3 steps here. So we're diving into what do I want, what don't I want. This is all about, this internal motivation builder exercise is all about having a conversation with yourself, beginning the conversation with yourself. The conversation is always going on in our heads, but often we tune it out and it's more of a one-way conversation. You're not really participating. So let's participate in that conversation. So we're going to start to notice what I want to do, what I don't want to do. Sounds pretty simple. We all know things that we do or don't want to do. Step 2 is we'll begin a self-discussion. And this is where writing it down looks like. And I'll show you in the next slide what writing it down could look like. But basically you're asking, okay, why? Why do I or don't I want to do this thing? And then these 2 points are really important. And you're just gonna really nail those in. And the 2 things are, is this really why? Am I going deep enough? Is this really why I do or don't want to do that? And is this why valid? Meaning, is that the decision that I want to be making? So we'll see what this all looks like momentarily. And then step 3 is, of course, putting it into action. This is those repetitive, taking those step after step, doing it often enough to actually let it sink into your mind a little bit. So putting it into action looks like you'll continue to adjust between those 2 questions. Is this really why? Is this valid? Is this really why? Is this really valid? Until you feel good about it. When we have a purpose with what we do it with more passion, right? So we have to do a lot of things in our life. Like I have to be on my school Zoom class meeting, right? I have to. You're going to be there anyway. You might as well choose to do it because you're already choosing to do it by doing it. So it's just this little kind of mental play that makes you connect to things and do them. You end up enjoying what you're doing anyway with more passion and more excitement. So before I switch, I'm going to just run through a quick example. This is something that has been relevant to me during this time. And this is I've noticed I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I wake up and I notice that I don't want to get out of bed, right? So I ask myself why. And it started with like, why? Because I have no reason to get up, because I don't really want to, or because, all right, we'll go with that. I don't really want to. That's where question 1 is this really why? Because I don't really want to. Well, I also just feel kind of purposeless, and I feel like I have to make so many decisions and I don't know where to start, and it just feels like a big obstacle, right? So you see how we're going from like, I feel lazy and I don't want to understanding a little bit more of what the challenge is. I feel directionless. It's hard to make decisions when I have so much space, right? And then, is this why valid? So yes, it's very valid. There's a lot of decisions to be making right now, and I don't necessarily feel inspired to get out of bed and go do them because I'm overwhelmed. So is that valid? It is valid. What can I do about it? So in asking myself these questions, literally as I'm laying in bed in the morning, because that's how I approach things, I start to realize that, yes, the problem is not getting out of bed. The problem is the lack of structure, the lack of too many decisions to be making in first thing in the morning. So how can I fix that problem instead of telling myself that I have a problem with motivation because I can't get out of bed first thing in the morning? Now I'm used to getting up at like 6 a.m., former recovering swimmer here, so we're used to the early mornings. That said, this is happening at like 7 a.m., so it's not like I'm sleeping till noon. If I was sleeping till noon, that why might not be valid, right? And that's where I say, no, I think I'm actually doing something that is not good for me. And so what this has evolved like as I do this day after day after day is I start to realize that I was focusing on the wrong problem, and that there's a way that what do I actually want? So I switch it from, I didn't want to get out of bed. What do I want? Well, I kind of enjoy laying here and listening to the birds chirping in the morning and giving myself 10 minutes to like just chill. And that's totally allowed and it's totally valid. And it was through doing this exercise that I totally transformed those first like 10 minutes of my day, where I'm getting out of bed now feeling more purposeful and more okay than when I was like dreading getting out of bed and saying there's something wrong with me, I'm not motivated enough to get out of bed. So that's one example. This is what your writing might look like as you're doing this exercise. And I suggest that you start on a piece of paper or in your notebook, and you leave that page open for a couple days, and you just keep adding stuff to it, right? As we work with mindset, there's a lot of things that come up later in the day. We can't always think of it right on the spot, and it's more of an ongoing process. We get more of those reps in if we come back to it time and time again. So leaving that open on your desk or wherever you're going to be able to quickly jot, like, oh, I just noticed that, the first one is a common one for me of like, I want to go get a snack. I want to go eat something. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media of like the quarantine 15, right? Like everyone's just like, ooh, I need a snack now for the 15th time. So that's a great example. Okay, why? And I've often found that it's because I need a distraction, because I'm overwhelmed, because like there's so much there. So you'll notice my little boring thumbs down. If you notice, that's a reminder that if your why is because I'm bored, that's not really why, right? That's question one. Is this really why? No, boring is not really a thing. Being bored is not really a thing. Being bored is a kind of a umbrella word that covers everything from stressed to anxious to overwhelmed to just like not stimulated enough, right? Which is what we commonly considered bored as. But it's you can pretty much translate bored to uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. Why am I uncomfortable, right? So if you find that feeling of like I'm bored coming up, dig deeper, ask that first question, is this really why? And as you go through and jot down your wants and your don't wants and why, is this really why, is this valid, you'll start to find the patterns. You'll start to see over time that there's something that's driving your decisions. And it takes a while to get to know what that is driving your decisions, what that voice is, what is it actually saying. It's a little bit more layered than just like, I want to do this or I don't want to do this, I should do this and I shouldn't do this. And again, that reminder of, are you focused on the process or on the outcome? That's just a secondary thought. So if you guys want to, I would love to hear you either share something that came up in the chat saying like, I noticed that I want to do this or don't want to do this because whatever. And oftentimes I find myself just being surprised by certain things that come up, like, oh, I'm really surprised that I want to do this because that, I didn't really connect that before. So I would love to, Caroline, should you guys want to try this out? Or do you have stuff that you've already noticing that you want or don't want and are ready to share?
Yeah, I think dropping it in the chat is so big, especially, everything that you were just talking about sparks and makes me think about things. Even if I don't know the why, I definitely know what I do and don't want, or some things at least. But when you said patterns thing, I'm very tuned into that right now in my life personally, just because I'm recognizing what my patterns have been my whole life, and maybe that they can be changed and tweaked a little bit accordingly, So like you said about the food or snacking, it's like usually you want to break. So for me, I noticed that right now in quarantine, I am craving these long walks or going out and taking these long walks. And I notice both sides of that. I notice why I want to and when I don't want to, and what the why is for that, which is interesting. So it's almost the same thing, but then it has two sides to it. So when I want to, it's because I feel like trapped or like things are closing in on me and I need freedom. Like I need expansiveness. I need that feeling of, being broad. And then when I'm, not wanting it, it's like, maybe I just need to sit and understand and organize like what I need to get done and my to-do. Like, it feels like I'm escaping if that's the case. And I just need to organize for a second. So that's just what came up for me that I was going to type in. But I think it would be really cool to hear from people.
Yeah, I would love to open it up in just a second. So prepare something to say if you want to share. I would love at least maybe 1 or 2 shares. But as we prepare for that, I think it's also something worth noting is a lot of our wants and don't wants are habits, like that going for a walk, like that wanting to go have a snack. A lot of it is just habitual. And like for Caroline, you said, I know what I want and what I don't want. I have a harder time with that. I have a harder time knowing what I actually do or don't want. Like we were saying, I want a snack, but I just actually want to move and like get up and change where I am. So just a quick note on like changing state, and changing state meaning like I'm sitting so I want to be moving, or I'm moving and I don't want to stop moving, or I'm sitting on the couch, that's my current state, and to get up and go do the dryland workout with my team on Zoom, I don't want to do that because it's a change. And it's like, as soon as I get started and get into it, I'm like, this is great, I feel great. But it was just that like getting into it, that change of state, that just like worth noticing. It's a habit of ours to want to stay as we are, so I just wanted to add that in there. But I would love 1 or 2 shares. Of course, everyone can share in the chat as much as they want. But if you want to share something that you noticed within yourself, go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll give it a minute or 2 for that. Just a quick share.
So I've noticed that like listening to music and then eating like snacks and just watching TV shows are like things I want, and then like to see friends and FaceTime, just like what you guys have said. Also, my name's Conrad, by the way.
Hi, Conrad. So what is the why behind that?
Just so that way I can keep myself busy and to keep myself pretty cheerful and have like a good mindset, because I like to have the mindset of live life at its fullest.
Awesome. Good. And is there anything that you feel like I don't want to do, like if you're thinking, oh, I should do something and I don't want to do it, and why? Has anything like that come up?
I haven't really thought about don't want right now.
Okay. So that's something you can work on, take on this exercise for. Cool. Thanks for sharing. Awesome. Anybody else want to share?
I can tune in with one. So similar to Caroline, I go on like daily long walks. This is actually something I did prior to quarantine, but it's been something that's kind of like heightened and more regular during quarantine. And yeah, for me, it's just a matter of getting out of the house, kind of a big why, and then also stepping away from a screen. I feel like right now, one of my biggest things is always being on a computer or a phone, always having like electronic communication happening, and I'm wearing an Apple Watch. So it's like this constant stimulation. And sometimes I just need to shut that all off and be able to go outside to decompress.
Absolutely. All right. Well, feel free to continue to share them in the chat. And like I've said many times, it's a repetitive exercise that I hope that you guys can take and find some of your patterns. Like Conrad was saying, I want to stay motivated. I want to stay like happy and excited, and these are the things that I'm doing because of that, right? So as we get to know our reasons for why that thing becomes more valid and more worthwhile. And like, yeah, I'm going to FaceTime a friend, and that's so important to me. And I've had days where I'm like, I feel like I'm not doing anything, right? And that helps me feel like I am actually doing quite a lot, because I'm taking care of myself, and I'm internally motivating myself to do things that I feel are the right things to be doing. And I'm getting to know when I'm hiding from things as well. All right. Anything else to add before we move on? Move on we shall.
Awesome. I like what you just said, by the way, about, when you're hiding from things or avoiding things, that for sure is important to recognize too, which is a great segue into having an accountability buddy, because that can help with that. So the second one that we're going to talk about goes really well with this first concept that Reb just shared, is when we have someone or some way to share what we are experiencing and our internal environment, or something that we've just accomplished or are thinking or feeling, it increases our quality of life. Okay, so before we go into anything else, remember that the quality of life piece is the most important throughout this whole journey in quarantine and beyond, is how can we increase that and enhance that within ourselves and with our outer world. So I'm going to tell a little story, what I've been going through in quarantine as far as having an accountability buddy. So a long time ago, I went to, even in high school and through college, I took a lot of art courses and AP art in high school. And then throughout college, took a lot of art courses, but couldn't really, do them much because of swimming, because all the labs were during practice. So switched my major there. And then afterwards I went to fashion school, and then I took a big break, and I didn't do anything for a really long time. Trickled back into my art last year. And then quarantine happened, and it was like this great quote unquote reason to just make more art. Cause I was like, well, I'm home and now I get to do this. And at first all these fears and self-doubts came in for me. And I was thinking like, I don't know, like, what am I doing? Like, if I can't share this with anybody, like, what does it really matter? And sharing it on social media is one thing, but like, I kind of want to show these to people in person, or I kind of want to like be able to like, have somebody come and see my art or something, or like put it in a show, or, some way to make it tangible and real. It felt fun for me. All of a sudden it felt like, whoa, this could be really cool. And I had dabbled in that a little bit, but nothing like this feeling before. So my friend who lives in Texas, her name is Lainey. She's a beautiful singer. She has always put that second for her career, and she's a stylist as well for like music videos and runway shows and all this. Like, she's very eclectic and fun. And so day 3 of quarantine, we were like, you know what? Let's share our art with each other. You share your music and I'll share my art with you. And every day, pretty much every day, we've been like Instagram messaging or sending each other, like she'll send me audio files of her clips of her music she's recorded. I'll send her my art. Like process of the art. Or some days I'm just frustrated and I just share that I'm frustrated because I have an artist block, or I don't have any motivation internally, can't find it to do that. So that has made a world of difference, because there's something special with having a connection with one other person, or 2 other people, 3 other people, whatever, within your circles, that feels really important, versus the whole world and just putting it out there on a social channel. It's a very intimate connection and a good feeling. So it was a spur of the moment decision that has made a world of difference for me in feeling seen and feeling like I have that contribution and significance and connection with what I like to create. So that being said, we are human beings that are hardwired for this type of connection. And during this time, it's really challenging to not be in big groups of people. Sure, we can have our families or a close group of friends, but are we really taking full advantage of that and creating an environment where we are sharing things in our lives, or at least sharing what our needs or our preferences are, and then feeling safe in that space to do so? I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with Brené Brown, but she's very big on this during quarantine as well, and speaks a lot on connection in general. So she's starting to help people move through connected spaces virtually. So what I want to say to wrap up this piece would be, there's no right or wrong way to do this. And I think that it's extremely important to find someone or a group of people, small group of people, that you can practice social distancing with, whether it's virtually or if it's your family, close quarters, in person. And I know that that can be challenging if we see each other a lot in our families and things of that nature, but really asking, like, can I share with you during this time? Can I share, finding something that you want to share? And maybe it's the internal motivation talk that we just had with them. Maybe it's your writing. Maybe it's, your goals. It's your fears. It's something, but having that connection and really amplifying that during this time, because it will go a long way afterwards as well. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like for everybody to either, we can unmute ourselves or drop in the chat a way that you have connected with someone during this time. I'd love to hear that from you guys. FaceTime, yes. FaceTime calls, thank goodness for technology. Yes.
Yeah, it's so good to be, this has to happen at a time when we can do things like this. And on the FaceTime note, I'll share mine. But having that one or two people who I kind of prefaced this conversation with, of saying, hey, I live alone. So if I need somebody, can I call you? That, like, I'm not always going to be like, oh my goodness, so excited about everything. Like, you're my person, and I'm going to need to ask for help from you sometimes. And that's how I've been able to bring in the accountability buddies. But that's also a lot of accountability on myself to say, hey, I need this right now. And often, like, I want to run and hide when I don't feel great. And a lot of not feeling great is not being connected. And so it's accountability on my part to say, I need my accountability buddy, and it's okay for me to ask for them to be here with me in this way.
Yes.
So I use FaceTime and then Instagram, like, video chat sometimes to connect with my friends. Because one of my friends I'm really good friends with on Instagram, and I just connect through video chat every once in a while.
Yeah. And finding creative ways to do that. I know I've seen people play games, like they play different drawing games on apps and stuff, like Hangman and whatever, and things like that. There's so many different resources.
House party, yeah.
House party. There's also like workouts, like people are doing workouts together and moving or FaceTiming while going on a walk, like creating that place where you can just talk about something silly. Or I know my friend started a movie club where they all tune in and literally just watch the movie together on mute. It's kind of funny, but like they feel like they're together because they live alone. So, again, like Reb said, accountability for yourself and knowing what you need, and remembering that that's very important as we move forward after quarantine as well. We're really fine tuning the art of connection during this time, and knowing what again, tuning back into the internal side of you. What feels uncomfortable when I do that? And what feels comfortable when I do that? And really being okay with that, and allowing yourself to feel okay with either of those, and working through that during this time. And would anybody else like to share before we go dive into some creativity? You can always drop it in the chat too. No worries. Cool. So on that note, another segue into this, piggybacking on what I just said about the art, would be exploration and creation as number 3 step to gaining confidence in quarantine. So play is the antidote of fear. So that's a I don't know who actually said that. I should have quoted that, but it's an actual quote, and I did not say it, but today I said it. But play is something that really enhances and creates, no pun intended, more creativity. So again, piggybacking on what I said last, now that you have a little bit of context, my art has been a very therapeutic exercise for me, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, in ways that I would not have imagined. I literally draw figures of humans, but it has the art of moving through that space that's not something physical like I'm used to in a physical exertion, or a work exertion or a computer exertion of that nature. It's something different for me that exercises a different part of my brain and a different part of my emotions. And at the beginning of it all, like I mentioned, even at the beginning of quarantine and even a while ago, I felt like I don't have time for this. I could be doing other stuff. I don't have time to play. Like, playing is looked down upon. If I play, then people are going to think I'm just wasting my time and I should be doing something more productive or something of that nature. And that just plagued me. It was like, I would post on Instagram something about my art, and I was like, looks like I just dilly-dally around my house and make and draw and paint and all these things. And for some reason, I had that defining me for so long. Like, I had this judgment of like who I was as a human being based on that. And so it really dimmed my light there for a while. And I started listening to all the peanut gallery about like whatever it was. And I let things get to me. And then I started tuning into my body and what I was feeling. And I felt like I started to regulate my nervous system during quarantine, especially through the act of making art and through playing. If I was stressed, I'd stop doing what I was doing, and I would literally doodle on a sketchbook for 5 minutes, and I could see myself enter a different state. So it then shapes my beliefs and my thoughts and all these things. Instead of spiraling out of control about all these stories, I was able to calm my body down. So that being said, again, play and creativity is a way, is a tunnel, is a channel, is a pathway into a greater version of yourself with whatever you're creating and doing. So some ideas here don't have to just be art, of course. You could build things, you can make videos, you can collect items like that you like, you can listen to podcasts, write, journal, make TikToks. Again, accountability buddy, finding somebody that likes to do what you do and do it together on Zoom or going on a walk if you live with that human. And it really allows you to be in a space where for a second, for a minute, or for a small chunk of time, all that matters is that thing that you are in flow with and playing and creating. The outcome is out the window. We don't need to have this pressure on us to have an outcome there. So, again, explore, create during this time. It will expand your mind a lot, way more than you would possibly know. And anything can go so long as it's safe. Obviously not setting off fireworks every day or something. Like, if that's play for you, then that's obviously fun, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I'll open it up one more time before we get into some Q&A. For any buddy that wants to share what they've done for play and creation during this time, I'd love to hear it.
I'll share that this one is hard for me. This one is hard for me, and I don't consider myself as creative, certainly not as creative as Caroline, but creativity comes in all different shapes and sizes. So for me, this has been mainly in writing in my journal. I really enjoy that, and it can feel like the same. Basically, you're doing the right thing if you have that feeling of like, but what's the outcome? Like, is this really worth the time? Because I'm not really like doing something that's how kind of writing was feeling for me. And so that's a sign that, yes, I'm doing this just because I enjoy it, because I'm playing with it. And for me, it was like, oh, I don't have to write in straight lines. Like maybe I can do fun things, or like add little shapes in there and like draw boxes. Like it doesn't have to be writing in the way that I used to think that writing was, and allowing myself to be a little bit more creative there. So there's an example for somebody that has a harder time resonating with creativity and art. Like that's hasn't been a place that I really explored much, but we are creative by nature because creativity is in everything that we do.
Yes, Reb, well said. Because no matter what you do creatively, it's not wrong. And that's the beauty of it, is that there's no right or wrong with it. Reb loves writing. I get anxious when I write. So it's almost a fun practice to try and write. Like, you guys, look, I've got like this little notebook of all of these like miniature writings, and I don't even really know what it says because I'm too nervous to even ever share it. But it is, for me, it's like a challenging thing. And I know that it's not right or wrong, right? Like you can just do it and know that you're engaging in something. So Reb, well said. Like it's all forms, like everything, writing, journaling, creating, building, like whatever you want to do is along those lines, which is fantastic.
I just thought of a great one that I do is rearranging my furniture. I've done that a few times, and I feel very creative when I do that.
Tetris. It's like Tetris.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is fantastic. And again, just to recap, we've got tuning into your internal motivation. We've got exploring and creating. And why am I blanking on the second one right now? I just saw a chat.
Accountability buddies.
Accountability buddies. I was in the chat box. Accountability buddies. So again, don't have to do them all. These aren't like obligatory things, like obligations. It's just ways that you can tap into that. Yes, Rubik's Cube. See, I love that. I need a Rubik's Cube. Sculpting is very interesting to me, and I was actually very mesmerized with watching videos of sculpting the other day. I was like, ooh. Awesome.
And if you don't have a thing and you're like, I don't really know, that's where it starts. What Caroline just said of like, I got really into watching these videos of like anything that's of interest to you, like that's a little portal, a little door that you can choose to go more into, and could be anything. Could be cooking videos, could be sculpting, or learning how to do a Rubik's Cube, which apparently we all need at this time. I'd love to hear how that's going for you, the Rubik's Cube, since you just started. Let us know if that's been something you've been able to figure out.
Gardening, Reb. We've got
gardening. Yes, so good. Cross stitch, embroidery, beautiful.
Legos, into that. That's fun.
Awesome. Great. Well, feel free to borrow other people's ideas from here or share more, but we'll begin to wrap up here. And I know we wanted to do a couple of questions. If anyone here has great questions, and Abby, you can jump in and stuff based on what we've talked about today, or in general with this topic of confidence around quarantine time.
I do have a question, actually. I thought of this one for you guys on the creation and exploratory, like number 3 of the quick tips. How would you guys kind of extrapolate that to when you go back to swimming and you're back into that routine of training? Like how did you guys keep training fun? Because both of you swim in, the highest level. And how did you make it not just up and down the black line every day?
You mean how would that be fun again? Or how do you incorporate this into
that? How would you incorporate this like advice that you're giving to someone who is training every single day? So how would they continue to make the sport fun when you're, training 25, 30 hours a week? And it can get very monotonous and routine. And right now we're out of a routine. So once we get back into that routine, sometimes people have a tendency to like lose that creativity and they just get back into the robotic mode. So how do you kind of continue that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, the truth is you never lose the creativity. It's just untapped, and it's feeling like it's blocked for some sort of reason, one way or another. Which that's the good news, right? Is that it's in there. It's just a matter of prioritizing that and finding what can I make time for, even if I don't have time, right? Like if we tell ourselves we don't have time and it's just exhausting and redundant and don't know how to create that time. And that's where you can like take it up a notch and find the little creative things that you maybe already are doing. Maybe you're doodling in your notebook and you don't really realize it, or maybe you are, watching, like we said, videos over and over and you're like very excited about that. So it's reframing, oh, I am creative in that way. I am doing that. And so I think it's just the way that we look at things and the way that we perceive them in those moments is like, what is creative, instead of forcing the word creativity into this meaning and this definition into this box. So for example, if all you have time for during that time is to listen to music, right? That's a creative act. Like music is a very creative thing, and everything can be creative, like we're saying, but you can reframe it like, that is my oasis. Like I feel very free in those moments and I feel very creative. So that is my time for me, and that is my creative time. So it's all our perception and how we view what we're doing.
Yeah, that's it. It is a good question. I'd like to share a little bit, like, because I remember a very clear moment in my swimming career when I was so not having fun. And the question was, how can I make it fun again? That's when I learned how to blow bubble rings, underwater bubble rings. That was my mission of practice. Granted, it was after practice. I would stay after, but I was like, all right, after practice, I get to work on the bubble rings again. And I just had so much fun with that it helped to really bring the creativity and the love back to swimming. Now, this was like after my first Olympics, after a big high, and then there was a big low, and it's just like, okay, what's the point of this? And it was like, bubble rings are the point. But just like bringing those little fun things, again, like what's the point of doing bubble rings? There is none. That is the point. That is the point. And we can tie all of our three topics together into answering that question too. And like, we take this back into, and the creativity comes back into our sport once we're back in the water, whenever that is, we don't really know. But that pulls into our internal motivation. Now I get to decide why I'm here, and I get to tune into what I'm doing with my time when I am here, when I am in practice. I get to ask myself, why am I doing this? Why am I moving my hand like this instead of like that? Like whatever it may be, we're more connected to the reason that we're doing it, because we're internally motivated. We've been practicing that at this time, making decisions based on what we want, what we need, what we want our outcome to be, or if we just want to enjoy this moment, forget the outcome. Right? We're more in tune with our internal motivation and reason for doing it. And we're just having fun with our accountability buddies now that we're back in our training environment, right? That can be a very creative outlet as well. Is like, there were times when I was having a hard time with swimming, and this was another silly goal that I set. My only goal for practice was to make other people laugh. And I'm not a particularly funny person, so that was a good mission. But it was my goal to be with my buddies, not thinking about how much practice is not really fun right now, or whatever the problem is. And then that exploration and creation within swimming, like you said, swimming back and forth. Like, I know there's a couple other sports represented here on this call today, but we all have our repetitive training. Mindset training is very repetitive as well. It's the exploration, the creation that we've like practiced through our art and through our Rubik's Cube and through our fun things that we bring into when we are training, and we get to really explore the fun parts of, or what is the exploration makes it fun, the curiosity. If we're just tuning out and like following the black line, swimming back and forth, that's when it gets a little bit like, okay, not so fun, not so creative.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that that's really great and super applicable to sport of swimming, but yet all sports, because as you said, all sports have a training routine and there's things that you do to make sure that you're on track towards your goals. So one other question that kind of popped into my mind and also I think would be applicable is how do you stay focused in a time like this when there isn't any necessarily planned competitions out ready for you guys or for us to get prepared for? What do you kind of work on or work towards? So say you know your why, but maybe your why is canceled. What do you do?
It's a great question. I think that's likely the number one thing that most people with plans that got canceled as far as like performances and all that are dealing with right now is, what do I do now that there's not this thing that I had planned? And so it's ironic because a lot of high performers and individuals will be training for this every day of their lives. Like, what do I do if something doesn't go as planned, and how do I pivot and how do I do that? But then when it actually happens, it's a different story, right? Like, we are actually in the experience and it's going on and you're like, oh, okay, now that it's happened, how can I do that? And so I think it is, again, the perception of what it is that we're experiencing. But I think it's controlling what we can control in the present moment, knowing that whatever is happening right now will directly impact the future no matter what. So, and regardless of what that is, that will still, we can still look for the positives there. So two different sides of that would be, one, we had Anita Alvarez on a webinar 2 weeks ago, and the Olympics were canceled. She was going to the Olympics. She's an artistic swimmer. And her thing was like, either we can sit here and use this time and know that, like, okay, we're going to take a big break. We can use this time in the future to say, okay, we reset ourselves. We took this break. We really got back internal and everything and like figured out what our motivations were. Or we can keep training on land and we can keep figuring out ways to do this, and we can Zoom call with different countries and we can do all these like different routines together and have some fun. And they chose that. And so because of that, they have been able to now impact the future based on that decision right now. So there really is that's a tough question because I think it's individual for each person, but just knowing that the overarching umbrella is that whatever you do right now, framing that in your mind is like, that is what I'm doing, and I'm going to commit to that process and make that decision and then make the very best of it, no matter if it's taking a big fat break or if it's continuing on with something that I want to create. Both of those things can positively impact my future.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think these are all really important questions, and we wish that we had a little bit more time to get through a lot more, but we want to be conscious of the time. So thank you for hanging a few minutes extra here. We're going to start to close up, but this video will be on YouTube, so you can share it with other friends or people that you might have thought of that might find it helpful, and feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help at this time and anytime, but we're here for you guys, and thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time to ask, the question of how can I improve myself at this time, and how can I make the best of this hand that I've been dealt, that we've all been dealt. So we want to thank you all for being here. You can you can keep the conversation going with us through email. We'll send you a follow-up email, but we're here to help out.
Awesome. Thank you both very much for doing the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Abby.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. So we'll go ahead and wrap up, but so great to see you all. Thanks for being here. And you guys can unmute and say your thank you and goodbyes if you'd like, but really great spending this time with you. And we hope that you guys tune into one of our future webinars. We're doing them every once a week or so. We have a couple of great ones lined up, including next week. This is a girls and women's talk with Kim Vandenberg, but we've had a few already that are on our YouTube channel, and so you can check those out there as well.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you guys for letting me share my ideas, because it's been a lot of fun, and you guys did a great job.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Awesome.
Appreciate that.
All right.